This is the last session of C 2022, and I'm really excited to get a chance to come up and chat with you guys. I know most of the people in this room, but if I've not met you yet, I'm Zoe Weldon, and I'm the Community Growth Lead at CrowdRiff. And you've heard a little bit said about the words the Riff. You'll notice my little R. So if you are in the Riff, this is probably a very recognizable symbol to you. And if not, you're going to hear a little bit more about it. I'm really thrilled to be having this conversation because this is going to be a goodie. The two people that I'm going to be introducing you to are not only amazing marketers and epic human beings, but they are phenomenal storytellers. Phenomenal. So they're also both part of the Riff, and the Riff, if you guys haven't heard of it, is CrowdRiff's supercharged online community, and we've got over 300 destination marketers from 250 destinations inside our online space. And what we really wanted to do here is that the conversations that we're having in the Riff they're really honest conversations. It's a place to support each other, and it's a place to really have those kind of like behind the scenes conversations. So what we wanted to do is bring those conversations, elevate those and bring them to the stage and be able to have a real life conversation that is about the obstacles that we all face. Like as marketers, there is a very particular kind of, obstacles that you face. And so what I wanted to do is have a very honest, behind-the-scenes conversation, true one, about the difficulties and obstacles that we face, and then the smart solutions and insights these marketers learn from them. So in this workshop, we're going to be joined by Victoria, Clarke, and Laurie Dempster. And I'm going to grab my little thing here. I've gone the wrong way. We're going to give okay, so Victoria Clarke is the CEO of Visit Mississauga, and she sits on various boards, including the Canadian Destination Leadership Council and CDME boards with Destinations International. We also have Laurie Dempster, and he's worked for Newfoundland and Labrador Tourism since 2016, and he now serves as the digital lead. His little tagline is something a little bit secret squirrel, and I'm going to share it because it's great. He says he is never one to let the truth get in the way of a good story. This tale teller spends his days sharing the curious and whimsical stories of his proud home province with the world. They are both also big fans of mint chocolate chip ice cream. If you guys don't know that, it's a big thing for me. And when you get into the Riff, you are asked that question, so you'll learn a little bit more about that one. So what I want to do is basically ask you to strap yourselves in. We have 30 minutes. This is going to be a wild ride, and I'd love to be able to introduce both Victoria and Laurie to the stage. We need music for you guys, do we?
We should have.
We
weren't fast enough. It was dead time. It's just like they just clapped and it's like.
I was expecting whimsical music too.
Oh, we should have had some whimsical for you.
Oh, this is so much different. Look, you got all kinds of stuff on this screen.
Okay, so in the lead up to this, we were really chatting. Oh, you can pop that there if you want.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, all right. We were chatting about challenging situations, and what came up in that conversation was the unpredictable world of working with influencers. Mm-hmm. And I'd love if you could share the story about what happened when you worked with a couple of local influencers around creating road trip content for you, itinerary, and really would love to know also what you learned from it.
Okay, cool. Yep. So we were approached by a couple of influencers, and they had this great idea for a cross-province itinerary, which is cool. We don't have a ton of those, and to get all of that into one package, we were really looking forward to that. So it was like, okay, great. So they go off and they do it. They promised 3 key deliverables. One was going to be photography. So there was a bunch of things we spec'd. We said, these are some gaps. Can you shoot this stuff? They're like, yep, no problem. The second thing was going to be an article. So it was going to be a nice thing that we could maybe cut up and use in a bunch of different spaces. And then the third thing was that they were big on a video series, which we were like, man, that's like what gravy, because we can cut that up. We can use that in a lot of different ways. So I had just taken over as the lead. And the first thing that showed up was the photos, which were, they were pretty artsy. So that was a little bit of a red flag. It was kind of like a cross between, I don't know, it was like they had just gotten out of film school or something, like they were experimenting a lot. So I was like, all right, that's cool. We can salvage some stuff. But there was a picture of them with a helicopter. was like, where are we going with this? Why is there a helicopter in these photos? Anyway, the article shows up. The article needed a bit of work, but again, a lot of just like the helicopter. And we're like, what is with this helicopter? And then the video series showed up. And the video series was like, it really was like a combination of like film noir and The Amazing Race. And I was like, what?
Which is your typical traveler to Newfoundland as well.
And, oh yeah, that's all of them.
Absolutely.
They show up.
Absolutely.
They're ready to go. And yeah, so the whole series was them traveling around in a helicopter, which made my heart sink because there was like 4 or 5 episodes and I watched and it really did crush me because it was like, well, I can't use any of this. Like we really couldn't. We salvaged what we could. We did the best we could with the article, the photography. And they were, I think they were sympathetic. I think maybe they had a vision for what they wanted to do and it had nothing to do with what we wanted. So it was very much, for them, it was an artistic endeavor. So that was an opportunity for us to learn, like, okay, going forward, we need to meet these people and find out, like, what do you actually want to do? You want to make a film with like very little color in it? Okay, that's probably not going to work for us. The other thing was, we had always had like a style guide and we'd had guidelines for like the voice you would use when you're speaking on behalf of the organization, but we didn't really ever put it into one place. So that was one of the first things I did, was a really like a hard-working guide. Like if you're going to be involved with us, if you're going to work for us, if you're going to represent us, if you're going to create content and media, then these are the things you're going to have to stick to, and this is how you do it. So a little bit was kind of like distilling down the secret sauce of how we create campaign-related content and media and things like that, but certainly well worth it. Since then, we've had the last couple of years, we've had just excellent relationships with influencers, and the outcome, the media, the content that came out of it's been really, really good. So, for as sick to my stomach as I was when I was kind of going through that process very early after I've been promoted, it paid dividends, in the long run.
So from that, because obviously it's tricky, and I know that you actually shared not one, but several influencer stories that slightly challenging.
So many. Those are the influencers. I love you. How many of you are in the audience? I love you. But there's some of you that are you're so weird. Like you guys are, your idea of what you want to create is you're so passionate, and sometimes it doesn't always align. Right?
Which is a great kind of segue into what you were just saying too, around what you've learned about that. Like what you've got from that is that people do have a creative vision. That's why you want to work with content creators and influencers, because they have a creative vision, but it's finding that alignment where they both, where they intersect. Yeah. So it sounds like from that system, like, did you have a brand book? Did you have any of that before you brought those influencers on?
I mean, yeah, we did, but again, it was a very much like a loose collection of documents, and what I did was I tied everything together. So it was really like, it became like a definitive, hardworking document, something that we could rely on for not only for influencers, but say for travel media, that kind of stuff as well. So it ended up being, again, as difficult as it was to go through it, what came out of it was very much worthwhile.
And the conversation, I would imagine too, just honing the kind of conversations you have through that, because it would have been a fairly difficult conversation to have when you got the content back and it was like,
okay, very good.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Okay, so then with that, I think also is that Victoria, it's kind of similar to the story that you shared with me about the community. I know it's not the community that you're in now, but it's definitely a part of your history as well too, with St. John, New Brunswick.
Yes, ma'am.
Getting that right.
Yes.
So can you tell us more about the St. Awesome campaign and really what you took away from that as well too?
No, I would love to. So in this room and everybody that's online of the sea of marketers, I'm really a salesperson. And so when I came in as CEO for Discover St. John and St. John, New Brunswick, I wanted to experience the sales activations that my team did across the country to attract business to St. John. And one of the first things I learned as I put my hand out to introduce myself to people is, I'm here with St. John, New Brunswick. People would immediately say, I had the time of my life in, and there's just in my mind, there would be ... And the other side of the ... would be, I had the time of my life in George Street, and George Street is St. John's, Newfoundland, and is not St. John, New Brunswick. And so when you are representing a company, when you are representing a brand, and every time you say Pepsi, somebody says Coke, you know that you need to change the narrative. And so we went into kind of a messaging exercise on how we could differentiate ourselves, particularly in the national market, because even in the national market, and then the international market's a whole other thing, but in the national market of differentiating New Brunswick from Newfoundland, when Newfoundland has such an incredibly strong brand. If you've sat on a flight with Air Canada, you've been served up a clothesline and icebergs and crayons and screw you, Newfoundland, because nobody knows who we are at all. And then just so you know, you can't make Saint sound different when it's ST period than when it's SAINT. You can't make that sound different. So we went out into what I think is a bit of a ballsy campaign. And so locally, in our region and our markets of highest affinity, we did Saint everything. So it was Saint delicious around food, and Saint historic around our beautiful, bricked buildings, Victorian, fully intact Victorian infrastructure, and even ventured as far as to say Saint romantic after a salesperson from Porter came and had dinner with me in this beautiful restaurant and was, wined and romanced by the chefs of St. John, but. So we started kind of shaking out what from that campaign was sticky. And again, I've got at the time an excellent board with excellent professional marketers on there that I could dip into their knowledge. And the stickiest one was St. Awesome, and St. Awesome was actually very broad. I mean, it wasn't about culinary, it wasn't about historic, it wasn't about the ocean side, which were all of our pillars. It was that one that was so broad, so you don't expect that to be sticky. So we went hard with St. Awesome. St. John is the first incorporated city in Canada. St. John is an industrial hub. It's the home of the largest oil refinery in Canada. It's home to the highest tides, but right when you see where the highest tides are, there is a huge pulp mill there. It's a city that thinks of itself as industrial and gritty and certainly not romantic. And I'm gonna tell you, certainly not awesome. So when you go out into a campaign that is not directed at your community, it's directed at your market, but your community is who consumes it first, you can get backlash. And so this is where this whole topic comes in. So as we were starting to gain momentum, within our markets of highest affinity in the region and across the country with St. Awesome, we were starting to see another hashtag rear its head in our social feeds, and it was Keep St. John Ugly. So here we are saying St. Awesome, look how cute we are, we're so beautiful, look at these, we're like selfie central. And I've started about 2015, so this would be about 2017 as we're coming into Canada 150 and wanting to build this great momentum. And Keep St. John Ugly kind of stopped me in my tracks. And it stopped me in my tracks because I had genuine civic pride. I come from morning radio, I come from philanthropy, where in these things you get embedded in the community, you get a community store, you feel like you know your community. And I'll tell you, getting accused of being a cheerleader or getting accused of being a booster when really it's the love of your community. But I had to take hope and faith that the fact that we were seeing Keep St. John Ugly was actually a reaction to the traction that we were getting with the optimism that was being generated from that branding. I can say that 4 years later, there's over 90,000 photos in Instagram that are hashtagged with St. Awesome. We've seen brands that I would say would be very conservative and risk averse, like Irving Oil, like J.D. Irving, Crosby's, Moosehead, that are all housed, and some of them are even as old as the country itself, use St. Awesome as part of their branding and part of their brand identification of where they are. So it was kind of an exciting way to bring it back. Again, on the sales side, coming in as St. Awesome, it just meant that, again, you can be criticized for using that type of language in a campaign because you're St. Awesome, that doesn't tell you where you are. It actually on the sales floor, which is different than when people have to consume your message online, they had to stop and ask us who that was, where that is. And in sales, if I can stop you for a moment where I get to talk to you, I'm going to win. So St. Awesome, so we took a little bit of your business, St. John's, Newfoundland, but you'll get it back, don't worry.
I mean,
So what helped that? What did she say?
Nothing. This is delicious water.
We'll sort this out later. The ocean took back some of your land there. Newfoundland this past weekend.
It's all right. We're used to it. It's all right.
So something you said there as well is that you were talking about having St. Awesome, and that obviously the community came up with Keep St. John Ugly. What was, like, how did you change that? What was the learning from that supported St. Awesome to continue to have that success that you were just sharing?
Do you know what? So we did some things tactically. We actually had, and people didn't realize whether they were being invited. People that started to take on using hashtag St. Awesome. And again, remember, like, the use of Instagram was different in 2017 than it is now. Like, now it's the newspaper. Like, now, like, I mean, where are you learning things? On Twitter and Instagram. But so we picked out people in the community that were using St. Awesome, and the beautiful thing was they literally didn't know it was a destination marketing message. Because also, I mean, you can walk down the street and ask people what they think about destination marketing, they'd say, what the hell are you talking about? So, so we invited those people to have an ice cream social, and everything was branded for St. Awesome. So we had balloons and T-shirts, and sent you home with swag that said St. Awesome. That became like one of the hottest things. Like, we started making swag just to give it away because people wanted it. I think that there was a hunger in the community, and I think I heard it from Indiana as well. I think there's a hunger in the community to speak optimistically about their community, but there's no kind of, your municipality can't do that. Your municipality, I mean, I'm coming from Canada, so your municipality can't talk about plowing side streets and how my car got stuck and I couldn't get to work because I'm on a D-stated street, and talk about how great your community is. You can't talk about child poverty rates and talk about how great your community is. So there's got to be a home for that. And so what it did is it actually elevated the visibility of what destination marketing is in our city, and changed the conversation. And it actually kind of brought along Keep St. John Ugly, because Keep St. John Ugly kind of became, you know, the CBGBs of saying, you know, St. Awesome. Like, nobody put Keep St. John Ugly on a T-shirt, but it kind of came along with us because we actually celebrated the ugly too.
So it sounds like within that is that having that kind of community buy-in really supported that growth.
It only, like, and again, if we boil it down, and again, I heard it from the earlier, like when the session just before ours, it's like we could have sat up here for that session too. If you don't have buy-in from your community, if you are not speaking about your community in an authentic way, it all breaks down. You can go out and say whatever you want to the rest of the world. If you've been lucky enough to attract people to come into your destination, and that's not how the destination speaks about itself, you lose. You lose.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm going to jump to Laurie, but I think that there's a part of what you shared earlier about what is, and it's kind of alluding to what you'll be talking about when you come back to talking about Visit Mississauga. There's a part of that kind of humbleness that happens within that process too. Yeah. And I feel like there is this, you know, there's so many moments where you're challenged within your role that can bring a lot of humbleness to you. And I wanted to ask you, Laurie, that you put aside a chunk of money, quite a large chunk of money, recently for a campaign, and it didn't actually go to plan. Yeah. So we'd love to find out, like, how were you able to pivot and turn that into an opportunity, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so icebergs are a big thing for us, obviously. Sorry, you guys don't get them. It's okay, I know. So that's something that it's one of our brand USPs for sure, but it's something that rates very highly in terms of people's bucket lists. You know, when we talk to our audience, one of the top one or two things is, I gotta come to Newfoundland, Labrador. I've got to see an iceberg. It's absolutely a bucket list thing. So one of the spaces that we created was icebergfinder.com. We created that some years ago. It's a huge tool for us. It's an entryway for a lot of our audience. We can bring them in. It's also a very interesting and hardworking tool. It's a map. It uses satellite data. It uses staff plotted icebergs, and it also uses UGC. Actually, we use Proudrift for it. So people can go out and explore, and if they see an iceberg, they can take a picture of it, and they can actually use icebergfinder.com to plot the location of it, show a photo or several photos, and we can also do things like provide driving directions. So you can click on a button to allow people, okay, this is where you have to go, these are the roads you have to take, this is the vantage point, right? So it's an interesting, hardworking, an innovative tool that we created, but it only works if there's icebergs. So if there are no icebergs, it's not really it's just gonna sit there and look pretty. And unfortunately, 21, not a great year for icebergs, not a great year. So, you know, it's a significant undertaking for us, and we got it all set up, and you know, there's satellites in the air, and then there's just no icebergs, or the ones we do see are so far offshore that you either can't get to them by a boat, and you can't see them from shore. So the iceberg season is, you know, April, May, June-ish, roughly. So that's 3 months where normally we are heavily engaged in this. There's a campaign that goes along with it. There's digital ad buys. There's everything that goes on along with that. So now I'm sitting there going, well, we don't have icebergs, and we got 3 months. What are we going to do? So the thing I said to you before was like, for us, that's kind of chaos, but there is opportunity in chaos. So, you know, how can we peel back the layers of the onion and look at what the audience is actually interested in? Because now I got 3 months. So what am I going to do? I know there's going to be no icebergs. There's no point in, you know, trying to do something that's not there. You can't get, you know, blood from a turnip. So we started looking at what the other things that the audience was interested in that we hadn't covered yet. So there's several. We had research going back to 2013. We started doing a deep dive into that, and one that came to the surface that looked promising, and it was actually geology. And it coincided with, there was a new UNESCO Global Geopark in our part of the world on the Bonavista Peninsula. And I thought, well, this is perfect. Like, I've got 3 months, you know, I've got a little bit of time. Let's create a campaign around geology. So we came up with a campaign site. We took pictures. We went out and shot video. And, you know, in terms of directly connecting with, you know, a niche group of audience members, it was working really well. But the other thing I would say about it was that industry took hold of it too. So as soon as they saw, like, you know, they're downtrodden, obviously there's no tours for icebergs, there's no people coming to the community for food and dining and all that, but, you know, when tourism says, like, okay, well, we can't do that, we're gonna go over here, now we'll try this. So tour operators that would normally take people out for icebergs then started doing geology tours, because yes, you can't see an iceberg, but one of the really interesting things about going out on a boat is you get a vantage point of the geology of the land that you cannot get from shore. So you can still tell a story that way. And there were plenty of operators that grabbed onto that with both hands and said, you know what, yeah, I can't do anything about icebergs, but if you guys are pushing the geology product that we have here that's special, that differentiates us, why don't let's grab on and let's do that. And so you know, that was really kind of making an opportunity out of chaos, for sure.
And it sounds like too is that for a lot of people, like nationally and international visitors as well too, like they know icebergs, Newfoundland icebergs. So to be able to expand their knowledge of what Newfoundland has to offer, obviously that's an opportunity that came from that then.
Yes. Oh, it's huge. It's a way in for us, because I mean, really, especially the international audience, they really just see the photos, right? It's like, okay, I see the iceberg, I see the whale, I see Western Brook Pond, you know, the gorgeous landscapes, but there's just like, you know, 50 or 100 different more layers underneath that. You know, there's people and culture and natural environment and history and heritage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's a good way in.
It sounds like a very local experience that they would get as well too, because it changes the kind of dialogue of something that's out there, and it's more about the land. So it's actually a really deeply connected conversation that you're having with the locals as well about the destination.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one of the local operators on the West Coast, I'll tell this real quick, I know we don't have a lot of time, but he operated a tour where he took us out and he showed us actually a rock face that was geologically significant. I couldn't really tell you exactly what it was now, because I forget, but apparently it was also a test range for French cannon ships. So they would sail into the harbor and that became their test range. So they'd fire off their cannons into the wall, and so you could still see all the pock marks. And then what happens was the cannons would fall down into the water, or the cannonballs would fall into the water. And this guy was talking about how his father and his grandfather, they would go out when they needed ballast for their boat, and they would go down and just pull these cannonballs out, and they became the ballast, you know, to stop their, you know, their Bay of Islands dories from rocking in the waves and stuff. So anyway, the stories that came out of it were wild, and all stuff that we could never have anticipated.
But a new story for you because of that. Amazing. And how about you, Victoria? Any moments to humble you in your new role at Visit Mississauga?
Well, first of all, there's no cannonballs any French cannonballs off the coast
Sorry.
of Mississauga. Although there is stone hookers. Do you know what? Coming from a city of 65,000, I've lived in New Brunswick. I grew up in Ontario, but lived in New Brunswick for the last 25 years. Coming from telling the story of a community that I've been embedded in for 25 years of 65,000, to come to a city that it's a brand new DMO. It's been covered by Toronto. It looks like Toronto to the rest of the world. Over 800,000 people. Over 30% South Asian descent in the community. 75 languages. 150 countries. This is from Pearson Airport down to Lake Ontario, the breadth and depth of stories to tell, where do you start? And so we've been investing in research, first of all, to speak to our citizens about how they feel about the industry, about our citizens, about what they love about the city, so that we can tell that story. And again, that's from my past learnings. It's not just that it's a best practice in the industry. My past learnings are, you better know what people know for sure, so that they're your ambassadors when you come. I would love to just have a campaign to say, you're here already because you land at Toronto, Lester B. Pearson Airport, which I will soon get renamed to the Hazel McCallion Mississauga Airport. It'll be disorienting for people at first, and then they'll just love it and get it. But
it's good to have a plan.
It works. It's probably going to happen. But to think that we're a destination that has 75 Fortune 500 companies, 5 national universities, and is the home for advanced manufacturing and tech and pharmacy, to try to tell a story that makes people want to come and stay. We've really needed to figure out what kind of our verticals are. I came in saying, a year ago, that we're not going to be speaking about ourselves as a leisure destination. Like, let's get serious. This is a suburb. We're not going to be talking about ourselves as a leisure destination. But over the last year, to see what the culinary scene is, one of the things that you were asking me about was humbling. I've now had dining experiences where I have to say, okay, I can't read the menu. Like, I literally can't read the menu. I don't know what we're ordering, and I'm open for everything. I don't know, but then I don't know how to respectfully eat this because I'm not being given utensils, or I don't know. I love to share food. I'm coming from whatever you eat, I want to eat what's on your plate because I probably have FOMO that I should have got what you got, and I want to eat off your plate, and what the etiquette is there. So it's melding that, who we see as our demographic for visitation, visiting friends and relatives, telling the culinary story that maybe this is the place where if you're never going to go to Bhutan, this is probably the closest you're going to get to have, Bhutanese momos here. And if you're from Bhutan, this is probably the taste of home that you're missing. Or if we're inviting your friends and relatives to come from India or anywhere in South Asia, that you're welcome here and that you're going to see a reflection of your community. But don't worry, an hour from the doorstep of Pearson, you can have your iconic Canadian experiences like Niagara Falls and like the Toronto experience of the CN Tower and everything. But it's trying to take this huge story of a destination that's never been told and try to distill it in a way that doesn't kind of I feel very conscious, and I think that this has been part of the conversations the last 2 days as well. I feel very conscious being, a white female East Coaster coming and telling a story that is not any of those three. So I do step aside to say that the community needs to tell its own story, and then to allow my team to elevate that story and make sure that we're putting it in the right market for the right customer at the right time.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I remember you saying that when you first stepped into the role, the content that you were sharing was very much information driven. So it wasn't necessarily the heart of that destination.
This is it. This is it. And you know what? And we're not there yet. We're going through the, I think that to set up a DMO, right? Like, that's the other thing is that, to set up a new DMO, like, you're not standing on the shoulder. I would say first and foremost that my experience in St. John was standing on the shoulders of giants. It was an excellent destination. There was a story to be told that just needed to be unlocked. It's out of the way. Our presenter yesterday, and I forgot your name when you were talking about that nobody just showed up at your destination. You had to invite them. Like, St. John, New Brunswick, no road, you don't pass through. Like New Brunswick might be considered a drive-through destination, but St. John isn't a drive-through. Well, Mississauga, you land there from around the world. So how do I capture you? Because I don't think your destination was Mississauga. Your destination was the Toronto airport to then go somewhere else. So how do I capture your imagination to stay that one night or to stay the one night longer with what is that highest affinity product that we have in our jurisdiction?
Yeah, and I remember you were sharing with me too around when you were first hired. You were hired as the expert, and like you know everything as you're stepping into the role, and you do.
Right.
You've got an enormous amount of information, but as you said, you're building a new DMO. So to step into these conversations, as I would imagine, would be very humbling in both regards, in your DMO, but then also in your community as well, and just learning how to represent so many voices as well.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's the reason that you get hired as CEO. You get hired as CEO because, you've dealt with a board before, or you've dealt with stakeholders before. You know, the St. John Hotel Association versus the Greater Toronto Hotel Association, not quite the same. 12 hotels versus 62. Like I said, the GTAA is not YSJ. And then just also, the other thing that we need to have context for is coming in COVID. We're not coming in as the flywheel is spinning. We're coming in as the flywheel has been stopped. And so creating priorities for restarting the industry as well. So some of the tactics that we've taken over the last year and a half, I would say, are recovery tactics and probably aren't things that we're going to do going forward. But again, trying to make sure that you're communicating that to the community to say, this is the kind of investments we made that were recovery investments, and these are the kind of investments and the kinds of stories that we're going to tell going forward, because you need to tell people the stories of what was possible now, and now we've got to tell people what's possible for the next 10 to 15 years, right? So no, it's been fascinating when people look to you to be an expert, and setting up a new DMO, to me, if you really were doing it right, you actually would be doing no selling and no marketing for at least the first 2 years. You would be doing research, you would be setting things up to best practice. We're within a municipality. I have a colleague here, Rob, and you're putting in things like Simple View. We're onboarding things like CrowdRiff and other subscriptions, so that you're using the best platforms in the market, and you're doing that while selling, you're doing that while marketing, you're doing that while brand building, you're doing that by figuring out what your differentiator is. You can make a lot of mistakes in that time, and so I'm not going to say they're catastrophic mistakes, but they're assumptions that until you have research to substantiate your investment and to kind of help inform your direction, like, you're going to make them. You just have to. You have to, and for us, in a status of recovery, you can't say, well, I appreciate that you have low or you have high vacancy in your hotel, but we're doing our market research. You can't. You're like, well, you just got to give her.
So you're just like learning on the road.
Yes,
learning
ma'am.
on the fly.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Well, we are at time. Do we have time for one question? If anyone has a question at all? Beautiful. This is perfect. Good. Amazing. Thank you. Well, I know that if anybody does have any questions, I'm just going to do, there we go. No, that one there. That is Victoria and Laurie's email. So if you do want to reach out to them about any questions, please feel free to. But thank you so much for having us as like the wrap up. That was the fastest 30 minutes. I actually looked at my clock a few times. Couldn't believe that. So thank you so much. And I will welcome Hannah to the stage. Hannah to the stage. Thank you.